All right, here we go. This is the first time I've ever done this. So if anyone's in there right now, let me know if this is working, if you can see me and if you can hear me. Welcome to my live stream, FJX 2000 Productions. My name is Hayden, and I'm an FJ Cruiser nerd. So if you have any questions about FJ Cruisers, anything about them, go ahead and ask, and I will answer away to the best of my ability. And hopefully the streaming quality isn't too bad. My house doesn't have the greatest internet of all time. Whenever I'm uploading a YouTube video, it usually takes like a long time. I usually do it when I'm sleeping. So that way, just in the morning, I wake up and it's already loaded. Welcome to FGX 2000 Productions live stream, all about FJ Cruisers. If you have any questions, feel free to say them in the live chat, and I will answer them to the best of my abilities. If you notice my cool FJ wheel t-shirt, this is non-sponsored, but from Cruiser Gear, it has all the different wheels that were used on FJs over the years. You have like the stock steel wheel, you have the 16-inch 5-spoke wheel, you have the traditional 6-spoke 17-inch wheel, the newer 7-spoke wheel, like I don't know, you just all these different designs. They're cool. I like this shirt. I wish Cruiser Gear like kept it in stock all the time. I have a couple of other FJ shirts. Thank you, Larry, for commenting. We both have quite the FJ addiction, don't we? And it's cool because Larry, who just commented in there, he's also from the forums, and we have very similar FJ builds. I believe he has a 2008 Trail Team Special Edition, just like me. We both live in Colorado, not too far from each other as well. So that's kind of a small world moment. I recently just got the new tires on my FJ, and they're those, if you saw the most recent video, they're like this 35-inch or 34-inch like pizza cutter tire, and the the tire pressure set from the factory is supposed to be at 46 psi, which is quite a lot. And unfortunately, it wasn't, I think, until 2012 that they added the TPMS reset button. And because of that, I've been trying to think of ways to kind of get around that. And I think I'm going to do the hack that they talk about on the forums, which is where you kind of like connect behind the dashboard, like a couple of the wires, and then it makes your little TPMS light turn off. And I'm hoping that that just makes the light go away, and then I don't have to worry about it. And then I can run whatever pressure I want, and I don't have to see that light all the time because I've had that light on for quite some time, and I am tired of ignoring it. I just want it to be gone. And I think doing the wiring hack is a lot easier to do than trying to take it all apart and take out the light bulb. But I don't know. I've never taken out the light bulbs or tried to change the light bulbs for like your FJ Cruiser's console or the dash. Welcome, people who are joining. Nothing stock anymore. Oh, thank you, Justin. I'm very proud of my special edition video. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Like I said in that video, I'm just like a special edition nerd. I just really enjoy the FJ Cruiser special editions. And whenever I see, like, I've owned the first one, which was that 2007 TRD Special Edition, and now I have my second one, which is the 2008 Trail Team Special Edition. And all the time, I'm kind of like looking at the market, thinking like, what could be FJ number 3? But it's so hard to justify like selling my current FJ just because I've put so much time into it, and I'm not really in like a financial position right now to sell my current FJ. But one of my dream FJs is a 2012 Trail Teams. I love the radiant red color. But yeah, I'm still debating on whether or not I'll do a second or not a second Trail Teams video, but a second special edition video, just because there's some from around the world that I haven't covered yet, like the UAE. Some of the people have commented on that special edition video and have been like, oh, I have the extreme edition, which is something that you find over in like Saudi Arabia. So maybe I'll do a video with that. Thank you, Tanner, for commenting. Tanner is a cousin of mine, and I'm glad that you love my videos. They're very specific to people who like FJs. But if you like FJs, then I think you enjoy my videos. But to those who are in the live stream right now, if you have any FJ questions, feel free to ask or give me your thoughts. Or if you have any ideas for future FJ videos or things that you want answered in videos, let me know, because at the moment I've kind of started working on another video, but I haven't gotten that far. So really I can make whatever video I want at this point. That was one of the things I want to do with this live stream, is whoever the people who show up are the most dedicated subscribers, and maybe there's something that they want answered in a video. So go ahead and let me know if there's anything on your mind that you want to see in a future video. I'd love to hear it. I was doing one of these test live streams the other day, and I had like one of my friends or my sister join on, and she was kind of telling me, like, I was saying something and then I'd ask her to tell me like how much of a latency there is between me seeing it and her like typing it. And it was about 15 seconds or 20 seconds. I don't know. So sorry if it's not like an immediate answer to your question. Ooh, a supercharger for the FJ. If I had the money for a supercharger, I'd be all down for that. It seems like the only supercharger out in the market right now is like the Magnuson one, which is like the XTRD supercharger. And if I could get one, if money were no option, I'd be like, heck yeah, get one for the FJ for sure. I've from the people that I've talked to who have them, they've said, oh, it was awesome. It's like the best upgrade. It's like their favorite modification they've done. But I feel bad because I think it was URD. They used to have a supercharger that wasn't the kind that they have right now that's offered on the market, where it kind of like bolts on to the top of your engine. It kind of looked like a turbocharger, but it wasn't powered by the exhaust. It was powered by the belt. So it was technically still a supercharger. And that design, they had like different stages. They had a stage 1 and a stage 2, and I think even a stage 3. But if you did those upgrades, I met a guy who had one of those, like the stage 3 URD supercharger upgrade. And holy moly, he said that he was pulling like 400 horsepower or something like that, which going from the factory like 260 would be like a huge boost, because I think this current superchargers get you up to like 330 something. I can't remember. So like a noticeable jump in power, but not a huge jump in power. I just barely rolled over to 150,000 miles on my FJ. And I saw someone selling an FJ similar to mine, like in build and year and everything. And they were asking like a crazy amount for it. So it's crazy. The resale value on these FJs has been skyrocketing lately. It's insane. I can't believe it. I even talked to one of my buddies who's kind of like the FJ buying and selling guru, who wrote the whole thing on the forums about buying and selling. And he even went and looked at an FJ for me that I was considering getting. happening. But he knows everything there is to know about buying and selling FJs. And he even said, like a year ago, if you told him your year, your mileage, and what modifications you had done to it, he could basically give you a ballpark figure of what a decent value for an FJ was, whether it was being for sale or you had it and you wanted to sell it, like what a good value is. But he said just within the last year, that price has changed like by 5,000 or something like that. Just a huge difference in margin as far as the resale value FJs go. So it's crazy. I just 172,000. Nice. I'll get there eventually. I'm hoping not very quickly, but it'll get there eventually, unless I decide to sell my FJ and go for FJ number 3. It's funny because in the first FJ, there were certain modifications that I did that I was like, yeah, if I ever had another FJ, I'd probably do this different, probably do this different. And, I kind of wanted to learn from my mistakes or earlier knowledge. And then as I got the second FJ, there's been upgrades that I've done that I've been like, yeah, this is good. Or again, maybe on another FJ, I'd do this differently. So that's why if I ever got FJ number 3, like I have a pretty good idea of like how I'd want to build it. Pretty much the video that I did, the like where to begin with mods video, where I kind of explained my recommendation for like a nice, clean, solid FJ build. Like that's what I'd want to do. Pretty much like a lift, 3-inch lift, keep it simple. 33-inch tires, because that's what works and it does great for FJs. I would want to do rock sliders, of course, skid plates, because those are very wise to have. And then like a front bumper, maybe even a rear bumper, but definitely a front bumper. And if there's just extra cash being thrown around, then why not a roof rack too? I really like the flat roof racks. Should they make an electric FJ? There's certain companies that do electric conversions, but I guess it's not as simple as you think, because you have to figure out where to put all the batteries, and you have to figure out like how it all will hook up the drivetrain. And one of the things that you don't think of is, and what makes quite a few $1,000s of difference, is whether or not you want an electric conversion with air conditioning or without air conditioning, because your air conditioning and heating comes from your engine. And without an engine there, you just have like an electric motor. You have to install a whole system just to retain air conditioning. There's companies that do electric conversions on Volkswagen Beetles, and since that's all they do, like the old school Beetles, they can just like get them knocked out like crazy, and it's actually not too bad if you look at the pricing. But if it's like a custom install on like a vehicle, like on an FJ, if you were just to take a random FJ Cruiser, like let's say a 2007, and you went to the company and said, hey, I want this to be electric, it would be quite a pretty penny. So if they were to bring the FJ back, with all these companies going all electric, I wouldn't be surprised if they decided, oh, let's try and do like what Hummer did, or what some of these other companies, like the new F-150 Lightning, like if they did an electric FJ, it'd be interesting. But I think everyone who has an FJ would probably prefer having a good old just engine, especially if there were like all these new engines that they're making. Kind of the idea is like go smaller, but like maybe add a turbocharger so it's more efficient. I think that would be really, really cool. A turbocharged FJ engine, get a little extra power out of it. I think that would be cool. Will 275 7017 KO2 fit on a stock? So yes, it will. Because even on my first FJ, before I ever had a lift or anything installed, I was able to fit 285. It had 16-inch wheels, so it's 285 75 R16 wheels, which is basically a 33 by 11.5-inch wheel. And the wheel, that 275, that's slightly narrower. That's about an 11-inch wide tire, and in about the same diameter, around a 33 or like a 32 and a half, somewhere in there. And I know people have run that on stock FJ setups, no lift, no no spacers or anything, and they have no problems. So I think you do pretty good. And even if you wanted to be safe, you could put that on there. And if you got your alignment adjusted a little forward, the caster That kind of spaces the tire even more away from the body mount, but that tire size is only a fraction bit wider and larger in diameter than the factory tire size, 265 70 R17. So you'd be perfectly fine. Thank you for the question, Kevin. John says, what's your opinion on cowl mounted lights? So you're talking about like the the roof mounted lights? Oh no, cowl mounted light. Yeah, like right by the corners of your window. I think they're cool, and I've never pulled the trigger just because on like putting them on my FJ, just because I have that's one of those, the cowls are one of those parts that's kind of a pain to remove, but if you do remove it and you don't replace the clips, you're basically guaranteeing that the driver's side one that doesn't have the antenna coming through it, you're basically guaranteeing that at some point that's going to fly off on the highway. So you definitely have to replace the clips. And I've always just kind of worried that, like, even though clips are easy to come by, I just worry that if I take it off and I like installed the cowl light and then I put it all back together, that I'd do something wrong and I'd lose that cowl piece and have to replace it. But otherwise, I think they look good, and I think they're really functional because, like, some people, they might just face them forward, but I figure that's what your roof is for, and that's what your bumper is for if you have lights there. I think the cowl is a perfect place to kind of aim those lights out to the side a little to fill those blind spots off to the corners. So that way you have your headlights facing forward and maybe some other auxiliary lights kind of facing forward, but then you have those cowl lights facing out to the side a little. So that way, as you're turning and you're off-roading, you can kind of see off to the edges. My dad, he has a truck and he has bumper lights, and he has 2 bumper lights facing forward and 2 off to the side. And he says that he loves that he can now see off to the side. So I like the idea that cowl lights add that functionality. But I know that if they're not facing enough out to the side, if they're still facing a little forward, some people complain about the glare on the hood, kind of, which would be the same problem if you had like an LED light bar on your roof, the glare coming off the hood. But for that, I say they sell those decals, kind of like what came on the 2010 Trail Team Special Edition, that black, matte black hood decal that could reduce glare and help a lot. But I recommend cowl lights. I think they're cool, but you definitely want to get mounts that are quality. Off the top of my head, I'm having trouble remembering which brand it is. If it's G-Silla or DB Customs, one of them was like one of the original ones that made those cowl mounts, and they're like actually solid. You can go on eBay or Amazon and you can find like the cheap knockoff versions from across the ocean, but like the FJ logo isn't quite right, and sometimes you'll get one that's correct and the other one is like reversed. And so if you don't get like the actual original cowl mounts, they're kind of janky looking. And so I recommend definitely getting the actual mounts, so that way you know they fit, because some people have to modify them to make them to fit if they're not the actual ones. And then plus they won't look tacky having like backwards FJ logo. The 275/70 is 32.2 and 10 wide because that's a tire. Oh, because I'm a tire guy. Okay, thank you, Larry, for commenting on that. Yeah, I knew it was somewhere in there. I knew it wasn't quite a 33, but even a 285/70 R17 isn't even quite a 33, but everyone just kind of rounds up and says, oh, yeah, 32.8, that's a 33-inch tire. So, yeah, if even that can fit on a stock setup, then, yeah, the 275/70 R17 should definitely fit. Look at the Firestone Destination XT. Yeah, I just barely got those Baja Boss AT tires for Mickey Thompson, and I haven't gone off-roading yet, but I need to. And living here in Colorado, not too far away from like Ouray and Silverton and Telluride, at some point, once those mountain passes open up, usually in July, that's when I'll probably get over there and run like Black Bear. And I want to run Poughkeepsie because, you know, that has the wall on it. If you've ever seen videos, I have some videos of the wall on Poughkeepsie Gulch, and you can find other videos too. But I think that's going to be a good test, because with my past with my current FJ and my past FJ, I've been able to get up the wall without winching, which I guess some years, especially if it's like wet, that's kind of like quite a feat in and of itself if you can get up the wall. And on my first FJ, I had 33 by 12.5 inch tire. So they're a really wide, knobby mud terrain tire. So it wasn't surprising that I got up the wall that year. And then on my second FJ, when I made it up the wall, I had just 285/75 R16. So just a 33-inch tire. And they were the general grabber tires. And those tires aren't like, they're like designed for dirt Baja style racing. They weren't really made for rock crawling, but I made it up the wall then too. So I'm hoping that if I can go back and do Poughkeepsie again with my current tires, that I can kind of see just how good they are. If I make it up the wall, no problem, then I can give Pizza Cutter tires an A+. Again, welcome to those who are joining the discussion. If you have any FJ questions, feel free to ask. We've had a couple good questions asked so far about tire size or cowl mounted lights. And if you have any other specific questions that maybe about modifications that you're thinking about doing, feel free to ask. And I'll give you my opinion. Um, just a background about me. When I was first wanting to get a car, when I was back in high school, first getting my license, I, being the regular teenager, just wanted something fast, something quick. And my parents are like, no, we don't want you to have something quick. We want you to have something good for like winter driving and something that if you hit a deer or an elk, you're not going to die, hopefully. And so we started looking around, and if my dad had it his way, I would have just gotten like a small early Toyota truck, not even like the Tacoma, but just those early small trucks, because he thought that that would be a good vehicle to have. And we thought about like maybe a Jeep or something, because in our family we used to have a Jeep, and that was great for going hunting with, and we like to go hunting and fishing and all that. But my dad but someone that lives in my neighborhood ended up getting an FJ Cruiser, and like I saw that, and he was like, "Oh, this thing is awesome! It's built like a tank," and that just stuck in my head. I still remember those words because I'm like, "Oh," as a teenager, like, "Oh, I want a tank," and even as an adult, people are like, "Oh, I want to drive a tank." So we started looking at FJs, and even though like me being a teenager, that's not really, the most practical vehicle in the world, an FJ Cruiser, but my mom thought like, oh, that looks so safe. That'll be really good for like wintertime driving here in Colorado. And if you hit an animal, it looks like you won't die. And we just kept looking around, and eventually we decided, yeah, let's do an FJ. And so I started test driving some, and we couldn't find one that was like a great deal or something that I wanted. But I came to the point where it was like, I either want a voodoo blue FJ, because we were looking at 2007s. I either wanted just the traditional voodoo blue FJ, because I love that bright voodoo blue color, like this little guy. So I either wanted like a voodoo blue FJ, or I loved the all black color, the TRD special edition, the black roof, the black body. I just thought it looked really slick. And it just so happened that the first one that we found was the TRD special edition, random enough. So my parents, they bought it, and my dad flew up to Idaho to pick it up, and then he drove it back home. And then that was kind of like my first car in high school, and I drove it for a few years, and then I went and served LDS mission. And so we sold the FJ right before the mission to help pay for the mission. And so kind of my parents money kind of went back toward, or well, that money from the FJ went back to them, because I was able to save up most of the money for my mission just from working through high school. And then when I got home, I was like, I want an FJ, but I want it to be mine, and I want it to be paid off by me. So I found an FJ in California. Again, this time I flew out there and picked it up, and I got a loan from the bank, and it was a 5-year loan. It was a long time to pay off the FJ, but that was the payments that I could manage month to month. And I just finished paying it off this past December. So now my FJ, I have the title, it's mine. And that's a really exciting thing, to kind of like have your own FJ. And so I'm really grateful for my parents for being willing to buy that first one for me. And unfortunately, they got me hooked. And here we are. Talking about winter driving, what do you treat your FJ for rust protection? Good question. So lately, the big thing that I've been seeing FJ Cruiser owners like really push a lot is the fluid film. And I haven't had any experience with it myself. Luckily, in Colorado, we don't use salt. And my FJ before that was living in Nevada and living in California. And the frame like has a little bit of surface rust like most FJ cruiser frames do. But luckily I don't have like a ton of rust. But in the places where I did have some noticeable rust, like on my rear axle, just a couple of years ago, I did use like a wire brush and some really rough sandpaper, and I like try to take down the rust and the surface paint just to get it down to like a good level. And then I personally at the time, because this was before I kind of learned about fluid film, I ended up getting some rust converter paint, and I think I just did. It was just like a black, like a matte black uh, rust converter paint that I taped everything off, and then I sprayed the axle and maybe a couple other spots like at the front skid plate at the time. That was before I got my aluminum ricochet skid plate, so it was like the factory skid plate. So I kind of like was treating it with this rust converting paint, but nowadays it seems like fluid film is the way to go. And I'm not 100% sure if that's like a paint or if it's just like a coating. So you'd still want to, take down the rust, like get it down to just like the bare metal, and then you probably want to do like a rust converter like base coat. And after you spray that down, that like you want to do a few layers of that to really encapsulate the frame and make sure it's protected. Then you do a few layers of like a rust converting, like a Rust-Oleum is what I think I used. Like, and if you want, you can do any color, but if you want to just look factory, you can use like a matte black or a gloss black if you want it shiny. And you just paint that over that, do a few layers, and then I guess you could do a clear coat over that if you wanted, and that'll make it even more protected. But then over the paint layers and everything that you've done, then you'd apply the fluid film, is my understanding at least. And the fluid film is supposed to help repel like salinity, like if you have salt on your roads wherever you are, those winter conditions can be really rough, and it's supposed to really, I guess from what I've heard, be really good. And these next 4 years, starting this coming fall, I'll be living in Utah full time, and there they do salt their roads, or at least if they don't salt it, they use like some sort of chemical. So I'm probably going to end up doing fluid film or something just to protect, just to protect my frame from becoming rusty. I've seen not too bad of rust in person, but I've seen pictures online of some folks who live some places that do get especially salty, or it's like salty weather. I don't know, maybe it's up near the Great Lakes or in the New England area. And they have some gnarly stuff. I have them saved on my computer. I have one person, they're the 4-wheel drive actuator or whatever it is. I think it's the e-locker for the rear differential, just completely rusted away into like dust. It was just in chunks. It had fallen apart. And I didn't even know that it could get that bad on an FJ that's relatively not that old, but I guess in bad enough conditions, it can really do a number on it. Have fun. Great live chat. Thank you, Larry. And yeah, I'd love to get together in Ouray. I have another buddy who lives in Ridgeway, which is kind of between Ouray and Grand Junction. He has a Jeep, but he was also like, oh, we need to go off-roading sometime in Ouray. And I was like, yeah. That's one of the nice things about living not too far away is I could make, I have in the past made like a day trip of it, just like going and running. Oh, I'm going to go do Imogene and Overpass. And it's just kind of a really special place to live in. And I can do the same thing with Moab. If I want to make a day trip out to Moab, I've done that before, and that's really cool. Can I say the N-word here? No, please don't. I would appreciate that not happening. T-shirt, where can I get one? Thank you for asking. So I was talking about it earlier. Cruiser Gear is the company. It's owned by my buddy Blake, and Cruiser Gear kind of is more oriented to land cruisers. And from time to time, they might release like an FJ cruiser. This is all FJ stuff, and I have a couple other FJ shirts, and I have paraphernalia around. I don't have any within arm length that I can show you, but like my car has a bunch of Cruiser Gear patches that I have on the roof now, and I have like a little keychain thing from Cruiser Gear, and I have a belt from Cruiser Gear, and so they sell like a lot of accessories. And so this shirt, I'm not sure if it's in stock right now from Cruiser Gear, but if you message them and maybe be like, hey, can you get that FJ Cruiser wheel shirt back in stock? Maybe they'll bring it back in stock. This is a shirt that I really like, but I don't wear it that often because it's white and I don't want to get it dirty. But the other shirt I really liked from Cruiser Gear was the FJ Heritage one, where it shows like an FJ 40 Land Cruiser grill, and then it shows like an FJ 60 grill, and then an 80 series, or like it kind of goes down through the the legacy of the grills, and then finally has an FJ Cruiser grill, which I know for some people that might be like a touchy subject of like, oh, an FJ Cruiser is not a real Land Cruiser. It's like, yeah, but it's at least like a cousin or a grandchild, at least. It's related in some way. So I like that shirt. So thank you for your question, Jamie. Off-road hub. We've got to get together sometime. I'm just up in Idaho. Yeah, especially with your build, going to the Rubicon is your goal soon. That's so awesome. I've never done the Rubicon. I'd love to do the Rubicon, but I'd love to do it when the FJ Cruiser is no longer my daily driver, when I no longer have to depend on it to get to and from work. When I have like a secondary vehicle and the FJ is just kind of like the toy, then I'd love to go do the Rubicon. And that seems like what the case is for the off-road hub. Is he's like, oh, let's solid axle this FJ up. And I think that's cool. Good for you. But I think if I was going to run it, I'd want to run it not on a solid axle FJ, but just on my FJ, even how it is right now, like long travel in the back, 3-inch lift, and see if the pizza cutters can make it happen. But maybe later on when I have some I don't know, some like way to transport it, like on a trailer or something. But that would be cool, even just getting together in Moab and doing something. What city are you moving to in Utah? Salt Lake. I'm actually going to be going to the University of Utah. I already have my undergrad, but I'm actually going to become a dentist. So right now I actually work at a dental office as a dental assistant, which is kind of like dental school boot camp. And so that's what kind of like why I've been making so many videos right now, is because one around, I'm going to be like hammered with studying for dental school. So I'm trying to knock out as many FJ videos as I can right now before I have to kind of say, or kind of like put, the channel or making videos on the back burner while I'm at dental school. So yeah, I'll be in Salt Lake going to dental school. Love your videos. I have a question. I've seen people put a 3-inch lift in the front and 2-inch lift in the back. They say it makes it perfectly level. What's your take? Great question. So I think I kind of mentioned it at some point in like my lift series. There's like the 3-part videos. There's like the first part, which kind of talks about the basics of FJ Cruiser suspension, kind of talks about what all the parts are. So that way, if you're brand new to FJs and brand new to the suspension of a vehicle, you could then crawl underneath the video and be like, oh, that's the sway bar, and oh, that's the front strut, and that's the sway bar link, or that's the CV axle. Like you could then identify stuff. And then in part 2 of that, you could then know what the different kinds of lifts are. And then in part 3, I kind of talk about more of like the details about different FJ Cruiser components. So as far as FJ Cruiser lifts go, I kind of just classify lifts as being like a leveling kit, a 3-inch lift, or a 6-inch lift. And then you might have like solid axle swap somewhere off in the distance. But like those are kind of the main lifts. How I look at it is you have your spacer lifts, your 3-inch lifts, and your 6-inch lifts. And so 3-inch lifts kind of vary how they're listed from one company to another. I just like it's just easier to kind of categorize them all in a 3-inch lift, so that since that's what they pretty much are. But some 3-inch lifts advertised from companies might be 2.5 inches in the front and 1.5 inches in the back, or 3 inches in the front and 2 inches in the back. And that's pretty much the case, but pretty much, it's all like a 3-inch lift. They just kind of list it for different reasons. I even heard down in Australia, like legally, you can't lift your vehicle more than 2 inches. So down there, it's very common to see like their version of a 3-inch lift is actually the 2-inch lift, which makes sense for down there. But yeah, the FJ from the factory is about 1 inch lower in the front than the rear. It kind of has like a nose down sort of look, like you have your FJ right here. these wheels don't really go up and down or anything, but the FJ is slightly lower in the front than it is the rear. And they just do that for handling and being able to see over the nose. But for people who want to level out the ride, that's kind of why they sell leveling kits. Some companies sell a spacer that you only put in the front. So then it levels out the front and it matches the rear. And then all of a sudden, oh, you have a leveled FJ. But really, you're not gaining much height, only about an inch in the front. But if you want a lift kit, it's kind of doing two things. It's lifting your vehicle and leveling it at the same time. So that's why it's adding 3 inches in the front. So you're getting that lift overall, that 3 inch lift, but to match the rear doesn't have to come up as much. So they only do 2 inches in the rear. But like I said, from company to company, that might vary. 2.5 in the front, 1.5 in the back, or 2 in the front, 1 in the back, 3 in the front, 2 in the back. So it just kind of depends. Like I said, I classify them all as 3-inch lifts, but that's a very common thing, and that's the reason why. It's just from the factory, the nose is slightly lower. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you for asking, MRAZ. Let's see, any issues with your wheel spacers? How long have you had them on your wheels? Great question. So my first FJ, I had my wide tires, and they were so wide that I needed to do the body mount chop. No surprise there. But they were so wide that they would also hit the upper control arm. So to avoid that, I got the wheel spacers. And when you add wheel spacers and you space that wheel out, you're making it even more likely to need a body mount chop. And so on my first FJ, I had wheel spacers, and I had them for 2.5 years. And I wouldn't just go on Amazon and buy the cheapest ones out there. I went with like kind of the FJ community trusted brand, which is Spider Tracks, spelled with like this Tracks is Trax. And Spider Tracks, as far as I know, I haven't met anyone in the FJ community that's had like a terrible experience with them. And I personally have had a perfectly fine experience with them. So I had them on my first FJ for 2.5 years, or at least a year and a half, whenever I got those new tires on my FJ. So about a year and a half. And then I've had them on my current FJ for the entire time I've owned it, which at this point is going over 5 years. And I've had no issues. You always have to take into consideration if you're doing any like maintenance, like changing out a CV axle or something, you have to take off the wheel and then take off the wheel spacer. A little bit of time to that, but I've done it so many times that it's not a huge deal. But when you put them on initially, the recommended way that you put them on is with Loctite. And so you tighten them down and you install them just normally, and you put that Loctite on there, and then you drive it for like 1,000 miles or something. I can't remember what the instructions say, but then they say you come in and you re-torque down everything, and that just kind of ensures that no looseness will happen. They won't come off and cause any problems. And as long as you're not going too wide with the wheel spacer, it shouldn't be too bad. The Spider Tracks wheel spacers are 1.25 inches, and that's kind of like the norm. Some people will get wheel spacers from other companies that are like 1.5 inches, just a little over 1.25 inches, just because they need that little bit of extra spacing for whatever reason. Again, you get a wheel spacer, you're going to need a body mount chop. That's pretty much almost how it always works. But it kind of makes your stance a little wider. So if you're on off camber situations, your FJ starting to tilt like this, you kind of give yourself a wider footprint and you're less likely to roll over technically. And it kind of offsets, you get higher and you're raising your center of gravity, which does technically make your tipping the ability to tip a little higher. So getting wheel spacers kind of counteracts that a little bit, makes your footprint a little wider and makes it so you're a little more stable. So I like the idea of wheel spacers, and I've personally never had any problems with mine. So that's my 2 cents on FJ Cruiser wheel spacers. Thank you for asking. Any other questions that you guys have? I love these questions. I love just getting to talk FJs. That's one of the things, that was one of the main reasons I wanted to do this live stream, is because I feel like at the FJ Summit or these other off-road events, you're able to get together with some other FJ Cruiser owners and you're able to just kind of talk FJs. And since everything's been shut down, I wanted to make just an opportunity for people to come on and ask questions, just talk about FJs. just tell me what you think about FJs, what travels or trips you've done with your FJ, what you think about them. If you think Toyota should bring them back, obviously yes, or else you wouldn't be here. And just any other questions you have. Cool, thanks. Have you changed your gears for 35-inch tires? No. And I guess if I was really thinking about it, that should be the next big mod I do for my current FJ. But right now I'm still running on the stock gears, and I've had my 35, like I've had oversized tires, oversized meaning bigger than 33s, for at least since 2018. I think that's when I got my 315 70 Art 17 tires. And like, even though I could notice a difference, the biggest difference for me, kind of like on a day-to-day basis, was if I was driving down the highway and I had the cruise control set with those larger tires, those 35-inch tires. I'm just going to call them 35s. Those 315 tires, it makes it so your RPMs, you can see like the cruise control is a little less effective. Like before, if you set your cruise control and you had stock tires, it seems like it does a pretty good job if you're going uphill or downhill, keeping those RPMs in the range that keeps you at the same speed that you've set your cruise control at. But with the larger tires, I set the cruise control and I hit a hill and my RPMs drop and my speed drops. So I have to like manually press down on the pedal to get it to go to the next gear. And some people they do, but some people will even manually shift with an automatic transmission and kind of get them into a lower gear to keep going. The interesting thing with the FJs though is that if you have an automatic and you have the cruise control set, you have it set to D just for drive, it'll be going and you can set it into fourth gear and it won't cancel out your cruise control. But you try going to third gear, which with the larger tires, you're having to do quite a bit to get up hills. It cancels out your cruise control, and then you have to reset the cruise control, which I mean is a little thing, but I definitely have that's the most noticeable that it is for me with the larger tires, at least with those 315s. I haven't done any long-term highway driving with my pizza cutter 35s yet, but I can tell you that already just driving around town with the narrower tires, I noticed that the wheel, it just feels a little more nimble, like it turns a little easier, just having that way smaller footprint of the pizza cutter. And it seems like the RPMs are kind of always a little lower, like maybe not 1,000 or anything, but at least like 100 RPMs lower than they normally were with the wider, big, fat tires. So I'm interested to kind of do, because I keep track of my gas mileage. I have like a little app. So anytime I've gotten gas, the whole time I've owned my FJ, I've always entered it in. And when I had my 33s on, I was getting around 15 miles per gallon. I have all the bumpers and roof rack and everything. So my FJ is kind of heavy and is a slug. So I had like 15 miles per gallon. And then I went with the bigger tires and I started getting kind of on average 14 miles per gallon, maybe a little like 14.3, but on average is about 14 miles per gallon. So I'm interested to see if that average kind of goes up with the pizza cutter tires. But I know that my RPM range and probably my mileage increase and get better as well if I did regear. So I guess that's something I should put on my list of things to do, is to get some gears. But one of the things I will say, this is a little tidbit of knowledge I have on FJ Cruiser gears, is if you have a 2007 to 2009 FJ, I recommend going with 456 gears, 4.56 gears. But if you have a 2010 or newer FJ, go with you have the option to go with 456 gears or 488 gears. But I do not recommend going with 488 gears on the earlier model FJs. It wasn't until the later years that they added, like they kind of upgraded the rear axle. So it's not the 8-inch rear diff, but it's the 8.2-inch. And that doesn't sound like a big difference, but I guess according to the Toyota engineers, it really does make a difference. And just look at those early 2007 FJs. They were breaking their ring gears and their pinion gears. That happened to me. So going with the newer upgraded axle was really something that the FJ needed. and one of those big upgrades they made for the 2010 and newer model years. And with a bigger gear, you can fit smaller teeth on there, the 488 gears. So I've heard that if you go with those smaller gears on the smaller axle, the smaller earlier FJ year axles, you're still going to break them because they're just too small. There's too many teeth. So that's why I recommend 456 gears if you're re-gearing an early FJ. But if it's 2010 or newer, you could go with 456, but then you also have the option of 488 gears. And so for me, if I was going to re-gear with my 2008 FJ, I'm going to go with 456 gears. But I haven't looked into it really. Like I haven't looked if I would go with like nitro gears or what. But that's definitely something that I probably should do. Let's see. How often should I grease my FJ and where? Great question. So the FJ has a few factory like Zerk fittings for greasing along the drive line, like in the U joints. And I think you'll want to do it at least on a yearly basis, just to kind of keep up with it. Or if you're just about to go on a big off-road trip or something, like, but like on your front, like out of the transfer case, there's one that goes to the front axle, one goes to the rear axle. And in both of the U joints, the front one and the rear one, on both of those axles, there are little fittings. They're kind of up in there. And sometimes you have to like turn the drive shaft so it's like in the right position so you can get the grease gun up there and grease those fittings. But you definitely want to grease those. And if you have any aftermarket components, like for me, I have grease fittings on my rear panhard bar, and I also have grease fittings on my front upper control arms. So I also have to make sure I grease those periodically. And some people, they have them on like their ball joints. If they have aftermarket ball joints, there's little fittings. I had aftermarket lower control arms that I replaced. I had a Moog lower control arm on my driver's side, and it had the Moog ball joint, and it had a little Zerk fitting on there. But that ball joint went bad because the way that the fitting was, unless I took it all apart, I couldn't ever grease it. And because I never greased it, that ball joint went bad. And then I had to replace the ball joint. And I actually posted a video, or I can't remember if I posted a video about that, but it was a pain in the butt. It was just, I would recommend if you're having to do anything lower control arm related, just replace the whole lower control arm. But do keep that in mind. You want to be able to have your little Zerk fittings accessible for a grease gun. So that's how often I would recommend it. I was talking with Warrior Fab about if they have any plans to make a sway bar link quick disconnects. I think the FJ is extremely in need of one, knowing the sway bar link fail and damage it makes. I've seen DIYs on how to make one, but I was scared to attempt making one. Yes, so as far as sway bar disconnects go, I did talk about those in my suspension videos. I can't remember which part, but in one of those parts I talk about them either in part 1 or part 3. I think it's part 3. But quick disconnects, they are nice, but I think in the FJ community it's either you run a sway bar or you just take the sway bar off. And that's hard to do when you're kind of in a position like me where it's like, oh yeah, I want the most out of my FJ anytime I go off-roading. I would love to just have it so I can quickly disconnect and then I go off-roading and I have unlimited travel. But then it's my daily driver. So I drive it on a daily basis, and I want it to feel like really good and have good control as I'm cornering. Because without sway bars, if you've ever driven without a sway bar, you have a whole lot of body roll, and specifically the front sway bar. And I think that's usually the sway bar that people want to add quick disconnects for, is that front sway bar. And it's let me gather my thoughts. The front sway bar, like you can build those quick disconnects, but I've met so many people that have like built them, like done it DIY, but just for whatever reason, the parts, they eventually come loose. The bolts, they fail just for whatever reason. And then the sway bar is kind of able to do whatever it wants. And then it hits your CV boot and tears your boot. Then you have to replace the CV boot or just the CV axle altogether. That's happened to me. Not with a quick disconnect on the front sway bar, but I've had a sway bar link come undone, and then just the sway bar just tears into the CV axle boot, and it's not great because then I had to replace the CV axle. which is never a great thing. So I think if you really built it well, if you really plan it out, or if you find someone who's built like a really good design, you could probably build them and run them and have no problems. But I personally, I run a front sway bar, but I don't run a rear sway bar because I have the rear long travel. And if I have the factory links on the rear sway bar with long travel, it bends the links because of how much weight and articulation the FJ is trying to do for the rear axle. And I actually had a buddy from Australia who's on the FJ Cruiser forums who's written some of those threads on how to build like do it yourself sway bar links. And he did it for the front and then he started doing them for the rear. And he had gotten them so they worked for the rear on like a normal lifted FJ or a stock FJ, but I had my rear long travel. So he kind of built me specifically like this test set of quick disconnects for the rear sway bar that were specific for a long traveled FJ Cruiser in the rear. And I tried running them, but unfortunately the bolts were just too long, so they would hit one of my rear links, not the sway bar links, but one of just the lower link if I was articulating all the way. And plus the boots that were on there were just not handling it, and the bushings that mount to the frame, those were kind of disintegrating as well. So comfortable keeping on for a long period of time. I just didn't want it to fail on the trail and then have to worry about it. And I just ended up removing the rear sway bar. And what I found is that removing the rear sway bar was a lot less noticeable than removing the front sway bar. I removed the front sway bar on this FJ a long time ago, and then on my first FJ, and you turn like on the highway at highway speeds, and you're like, ooh, this is a little funky. And I didn't like how it felt. Some people, they get used to it, and so they just run without a sway bar, which good for them. And especially if you're like off-roading every weekend, then I could see justifying removing the sway bar altogether and not worrying about it. But for me, FJ is a daily driver. I keep the front sway bar on, and it makes it feel nice and normal when I'm turning and when I'm driving, and I don't have to worry about it feeling too squirrely. And the rear sway bar, it's off, but hardly even noticeable. I forget that I don't even have it, and it's nice that I can go off-roading and not have that limitation. MRAS, check out Wanderlost Off-Road YouTube. They mention a company. Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, I know that YouTube channel as well. They post a lot of stuff. And yeah, if you can get quick disconnects to work for your FJ and you're willing to try them and kind of or you're willing to like put in the time to even build them yourself, then cool. And if you can find like really good high quality components and you use like Loctite on everything, so that way the bolts don't like come undone by themselves eventually, then I do recommend that quick disconnects are a great way to do it. But the easier way to do it, and what most people do, is just remove the sway bar altogether. I think I'll stop this stream at an hour. Right now we're at like 52.5 minutes. So 7.5 minutes left. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Or if you have any ideas for future FJ videos, like things you want kind of discussed, like I've done my lift series. I did my like what I recommend mod wise, because lots of people ask like, where do I begin with mods? And so I did a whole video on that. And I did my video about special editions, because that's a topic I really enjoy, is talking about special edition FJ Cruisers. So if you have anything else you want, let me know. I did that video too. That was kind of like a compilation of all the different front bumpers for FJ Cruisers. And that took like a ton of time. Like as I was editing it, I kept finding more and more bumpers because I wanted to include as many as I could. And I know there's going to be like a ton of custom bumpers that I obviously couldn't put in there, because custom bumpers, people keep making new ones all the time. But I wanted to definitely make sure I had all the bumpers that were currently in production, and I found as many bumpers as I could that are no longer in production. So to make that video took forever, and you watch that video and you can see there's so many bumpers out there. And so some people have asked like, oh, could you make a video just like talking about like maybe what you recommend as far as a bumper? And I've seen people ask like for bumper or for a video talking about what I recommend, or just talking and discussing about rear links on the rear axle or the rear panhard. They want to know more about that. So I thought about maybe doing a video about that. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Thank you, MRAS, for joining the video. I don't know if that was you signing off, but thank you for watching. Any questions out there? for FJs. We have about 5 minutes left of the live stream. If you want me to do this again, let me know, because I'd be happy to keep answering people's questions if we do more live streams like this. I'm not sure how frequently, but just let me know. I always read. I read all the comments, all my videos. I try to like and reply to certain comments as well. So don't feel like you're being ignored. And moving down the St. George area in Southwest Utah. Don't know if you're familiar with St. George, but if you are, can you recommend off-road group or groups or a good mechanic? So I've been to St. George, and I know people who live in St. George, but I don't know many off-roaders or many people in the FJ community down in St. George, unfortunately. I know it's a really good area because there's like the Sand Hollow off-road area not too far from St. George that a lot of people really like to go to. But I don't know of any groups. Probably a good way to find out about that is maybe Facebook. Because they made like a Utah section on the FJ Cruiser forums, and I was there on the forums when they made it, and I was in Utah, so it was like such an exciting time. And at the time, the FJ Cruiser forums, the Utah page was like popping. People were always like, we set up some trail runs and meetups, meet and greets on there. It was really great. But lately, the FJ Cruiser forums Utah page has kind of calmed down. And for a while, there's been Facebook pages that have gotten really high up, and then they've kind of dissipated off. But maybe just ask on Facebook some of the Utah FJ pages and see if there's any other St. George folks down there that you can meet up with. Definitely do this again. Sure thing. I'd love to. Let's see. Most important preventative maintenance mod. So not too long ago on the FJ Cruiser thread, because I like looked through all the FJ Cruiser manuals. They have like a service manual that will come with the FJs, and the service manuals have kind of changed over the years from the early model FJs and the later model FJs. And so I kind of read through all the service manuals, and I saw like what intervals they recommended certain modification or like certain maintenance. And so on the forums, I have a list like this. I have a thread, but it's basically this like my recommendation of like service that you do for your FJ. And probably the most important preventative maintenance. Oh goodness, I'm looking at this. Preventative maintenance. I don't know, probably. I feel like one thing that's overlooked a lot of times, this is what it is: transmissions. So a lot of people, the Toyota transmissions, they say they use the world standard fluid. And so people think, oh, it's the world standard. And even Toyota will say, yeah, it'll last the lifetime of the transmission. You never have to replace it. But they wouldn't put a drain and a fill plug on something that wasn't meant to be replaced. And I just last year, or when I was around like 130,000 miles, or 140,000 miles, I decided to do kind of like a dump and refill of my transmission fluid. And I'm super glad I did, because the stuff I took out, even in my automatic transmission, like smelled pretty burnt and was like black. And the stuff I put in, the new stuff, is red. So I definitely, and I kind of felt a difference too in the shifting, and some people do as well. They feel it shifts smoother. So I definitely recommend preventative maintenance. Make sure you take care of your transmission, replace those fluids. You can do some research about changing the transmission fluid. I won't get into it detail here, but I definitely recommend don't ignore your transmission. It's important. And if you have a manual transmission, then it's definitely recommended that you do it. But people kind of overlook the automatic transmissions, but don't ignore your automatic transmission fluid. Make sure you change it. When are you making the special edition FJs not from the US? Well, I started working on that video, and then I kind of I've lost a little steam, but I can get back to work on it, and I can definitely cover the rest of the special editions, because there's some special editions or like unique FJs that I wanted to cover that were still in the US, but then there's also like the final edition that they did in Japan the last year that they had the FJ in Japan. And then there's like the FJ Extreme, like you just said, Rigo, from the UAE, which I definitely want to cover as well. So soon, hopefully soon, I'll get back to work on that video. Have you put in a transmission cooler? I'm trying to figure out if I should get one. So if you're doing a lot of driving on highways like mountain passes and you're having problems with maybe your transmission overheating, and especially if you're towing, some people will like if you're basically towing with an FJ, the FJ kind of needs there isn't like super powerful tower in the first place, but if you are towing, I highly recommend a transmission cooler. And it was interesting. One day I was in Utah off-roading on this trail, and it was just a group of all FJs. We had about 10 of us, and we were off-roading on this mountain, not a super crazy trail or anything, but it was pretty rocky and it was a good climb. And it was interesting because half of the FJs in the group did perfectly fine. No lights on the dash came up or anything, but the other half had their transmission uh, overheating lamp or light come on. And a lot of people were all in 4 low. Everyone was kind of taking it the same trail, but some people, their little overheating lamp came on. And they said, this is the first and only time I've ever seen the transmission heat light come on. And some of them were like, maybe I should consider putting in a transmission cooler. So if you're doing like off-roading, it's never a bad idea. And if you just want to like do something that kind of increases the performance of your FJ by decreasing your transmission temperature by a few degrees, transmission cooler is definitely recommended. I haven't done one personally, but I have thought about it. I just don't tow enough to justify it. And I've never had the light come on in general, even when off-roading on trails. So until that light comes on or I start towing stuff, I probably wouldn't get a transmission cooler, but I think it's fine for other people who want to get them, especially here in Colorado if you're having to go over mountain passes. Yeah. Let me ask you this. Some people change the alternator for a 4Runner, 130 amps. Do you think the upgrade worth it? So I've actually done that upgrade where my when my FJ Cruiser's what's it called? Yeah, alternator. When my FJ Cruiser's alternator went out, it went out around 120,000 miles. From the factory, it's only 100 amps. But for the Tacoma with the towing package for the same like model year, it was like 130 amps, which in theory could then kind of, if you had those additional amps, it could help power like your aftermarket accessories. So that's what I did. I actually did that. I went and got a 130 amp alternator. And I've never tested it to see like if it is truly 130 amps versus the factory one that's supposed to be 100 amps. And I've never really noticed the difference, but I did do that upgrade. And I guess it kind of adds a little peace of mind knowing that, oh yeah, if I was running the winch, it'll be able to handle it a little better or something like that. So I think if you're having to replace your alternator anyways, then sure, go with it. But for me, I wouldn't just go out of my way to replace the alternator with something that gets you like 30 more amps because I don't think it makes that big of a difference. Thanks. Definitely return for some FJ chat. Video idea on favorite off-road destinations near Utah. Yeah, I could definitely do that. I'm not as well traveled in Utah as I wish. Living up in like the Provo, Orem area up in northern Utah near Salt Lake. I've done some trails out there, but definitely not a whole lot. And I've only done, even though I've lived so close to Moab and in my lifetime from where I live in Colorado and where all my family is in Utah, I've driven through Moab like literally hundreds, if not thousands of times in my lifetime, definitely hundreds. And I've only gone there to off-road like maybe 10 times. I know, sad. And a lot of the times I've run the same trails when I've gone and done that. So I'm not like the most well-versed person as far as like, oh, these are all the trails you need to visit. But I could definitely recommend some trails, especially for people who might be newer to FJs who don't want to jump all the way into the deep end, but want some trails that'll definitely give you like a good taste of what off-roading is like with the FJ. If you want to install an LED bar and lights, would you run them on the main battery or install an additional one? So I've never looked too seriously into adding a secondary battery setup, but I know tons of people have LED bars just wired up to their normal bumper or to their normal battery without any problems. I have just a small like 25-inch LED bumper light on my bumper. And then I have two, what are they called? Baja Designs, like fog lights that I have down on my bumpers. And those are all coming just from my singular battery, and I've had no problems. Maybe if you had like lights, like a full-size roof rack bar, and you had lights all around your roof rack, and you had all sorts of stuff like that, then maybe you could consider getting a secondary battery. But I think secondary batteries are really for people who are just kind of getting into overlanding and they want that additional power for accessories like a refrigerator that'll be running all the time while they're camping and things like that. For just like lighting accessories, especially because LEDs are so much more efficient than like the old school halogen lights, I don't think you can really justify too much getting a secondary battery just for like additional LED on your FJ. Is the FJ bump caused by low transmission fluid or drive shaft needing lube? I've heard about the FJ bump. Is that the thing that happens when like you're braking and someone kind of like is bumping you from behind, like some sort of weird thing? Is that what you're having experience, or is that what you're experiencing, Jamie? Let me know. I decided to replace my serpentine belt. Should I change my pulleys, tensioner, and water pump at the same time? If they're not giving you any trouble, I wouldn't replace them, because the factory ones, they should last you a long time. And aftermarket ones that you get, like if you're ordering it from Rock Auto and they're like from some other company, they're no longer factory. And if they're not giving you any trouble, like it's kind of like the old adage, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And sometimes I replace things even if they're not quite broke, but they're kind of getting worn out. So if you feel like your tensioner or your pulleys or any of those, like your water pump, if you feel like they're going out and you want to make sure you prevent bad things from happening, like if you're stranded out in the middle of the desert, then yeah, maybe you want to replace them. But if they're not giving you any issues, I wouldn't just replace them to replace them. But the belt is probably not a bad idea, and that's an easy change to do, especially if you saw like cracks forming in your old belt just from being kind of dried out. Bandolero or Colorado, still very close to Utah. Yeah. And in Colorado, there's so many trails, especially up like towards northern Colorado, the Denver area. My favorite book, let me grab this real quick. I have quite the assortment here. So I love these Fun Treks, this brand. If you check out their stuff, does it say Fun Treks on the front? Well, it says it on the back. This company right here, Fun Treks, they sell these really great guidebooks, and they sell them for Moab. I have this Moab version. Like they had this is the second edition, and then I got the newer edition because it's a little easier to understand and read. And then I have the older Colorado version, and then I have the newer Colorado version. So if you want trails are out there, look at the Fun Treks books. They have them for Moab, they have them for Colorado, and they have one specifically for northern Colorado. And I think they have them out in California, and they have one for maybe Arizona as well. So just check out Fun Treks. I recommend them. Not sponsored, but I like their books. They make picking trails very easy, especially like around FJ Summit time. That was one of the things that really helped me, is those books. And they have nice little maps, and they have odometer markers so you know where you should be at what point on the trail. So that's something that I recommend to you, Bandolero. Let's see, FJ lurches from time to time. What am I saying? Yeah, so I've heard of that, the FJ bump. I guess since I haven't experienced it, I haven't ever looked into it too much. But the FJ Cruiser forums is a wealth of knowledge, and there's definitely threads on there about it. I've only ever kind of skimmed them, just so like I've heard of the FJ bump, but I'm not sure really what it is for sure. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have like a manual transmission, or is it an automatic transmission? That'd be a good question, because I feel like that would be something more common with maybe a manual transmission and something going out in your transmission. But I don't know. Let me know. But we're a little over an hour, and I wasn't planning on going quite this long, but I'm glad that you guys showed up and were willing to help support the channel and watch the video. like I said, this is my first live stream, so I'm not really sure what I was doing. I just wanted to come on here and talk FJs with y'all in auto trans. Okay. Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I know some people have like thought maybe it is something to do with the drive shafts and like greasing the drive shafts, making sure that they're taken care of. And uh, but other than that, I would do some research on the FJ Cruiser forums and see what people say, and see what some people have done to maybe help eliminate that, because I don't know. Let's see. Baldwin 18 says I fixed mine after greasing the slip yokes. Just be careful not to overfill. Yes, that's what I feel like that's what I had heard. That's why I mentioned that, like greasing the drive shafts, and those slip yokes are where I think where the drive shaft can kind of like slide out or slide in, and they recommend doing that in general. It says my connection is okay. Uh, but yeah, if you haven't changed your transmission fluid in general, I recommend changing it. But if you're experiencing the bump, it's definitely worth a try, just because you probably need it as preventative maintenance. And excuse me, yeah, excuse me, I might sneeze again. Oh, embarrassing. But anyways, so yeah, try greasing those things on your drive shaft and try changing your transmission fluid. See if that helps you out, Jamie. Hopefully that helps. I'm glad that some people chimed in too who are experiencing it or had things to recommend. Thank you guys. I'm glad that you're all here. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Haven't already, check out some of my recent FJ videos, or just want to watch some good old classic FJ off-roading videos. I have plenty of those that you can check out, especially ones from FJ Summit where I get some nice drone footage. I love those videos. I'm really proud of those. So make sure to check those out. Thank you, MRAS. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Clayton. Thank you, P. Baldwin. Thank you, Bandolero. Thank you, Emraz. Thank you, everyone who's shown up. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you, Rigo. Thank you. Who else showed up? Thank you, Tanner. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Cream Pie Lars. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, John. Thank you, Justin. Thank you all for joining. All those who commented and participated. And oh, Maureen. I'm sorry I missed this. I'll go back and watch. Perfect. No problem. But thank you guys for checking in. Thank you for watching. Hopefully we'll do this again soon. And enjoy your FJs if you have them. And take care. Thank you.